Okay. Zephaniah. So we're gonna read the first 6 or 7 verses here. We'll be going back, if you want to, Mark, back in 2 Chronicles chapter 33. And, well, we may do that after we read verse 1. Most of the time when we're reading about the prophets and everything, you have an introduction at the start, okay? I am so-and-so, son of so-and-so, or, that kind of thing. Zephaniah gives a lot of names here, and there's a reason behind that, and a picture that I think maybe kind of enlightens the whole book and tells us why Zephaniah is the one to give this particular message, because he gives this message at the same time that Jeremiah is a prophet, Nahum is a prophet, the same time. They're contemporaries of his. Again, it's kind of like when we talked about what Daniel and Ezekiel, they may or may not know each other. Remember Daniel was with the king and all them, and Ezekiel was kind of the blue collar when we talked about that. They were at the same time. You kind of think they probably had to cross paths, but you really are not sure about that. So let's read these verses and then have a little prayer, and then we'll kind of jump back there to 2 Chronicles chapter 33. The word of the Lord which came into Zephaniah the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judea. And just to give you a little bit of Zephaniah's message, in case somehow you give a thought, maybe this is going to be a nice, encouraging little prophecy. Here's his first words. I will utterly consume all things from off the land, said the Lord. Whoa. Zephaniah is rough. You don't hear many sermons preached out of Zephaniah. Not a lot. Gets encouraging kind of towards the 3rd chapter, because all of those guys gave an encouraging message in the end of what God's going to do. But this is harsh. I mean, he's trying to get their attention. And why wouldn't he? You got other prophets that are trying to share the news of what's going on. And as we read this, of course, we know that the Babylonian kingdom is getting ready to march. We keep talking about that, right? When we talk about Naaman and we talk about those prophets, and we talk about all that the Babylonians are getting ready to march or overtake, and so they're preaching these messages. So let me read that again. The word of the Lord which came into Zephaniah the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judea. Now, how many of you read that verse and go, woo, ready to read now the book, right? Well, jump back. We'll find out who these people are. He's trying to send a message there to us, or tell us something. And he actually does it pretty clearly when you go back and you trace it. 2 Chronicles chapter 33. So if you go back and you find Kings and 1st, 2nd Samuel, you'll be right in there. And then just keep going to Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter 33. You might want to keep your finger back up there in Zephaniah so that you can kind of jump back up there in a minute. Chapter 33. Okay, so first name, Manasseh. Okay, was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. Who's Manasseh? He's the son of Hezekiah. Okay? Hezekiah, which is who? He is Zephaniah's great-great-grandpa in what we just read. Okay? So, Zephaniah's great-great-grandpa dies, and Manasseh is chosen to follow him. Okay? I think if you follow that down, then you would say, and Manasseh's brother, which would be Zephaniah's grandpa, Cushai, is not chosen. Why would that be? Well, Manasseh would what? Probably be the oldest child. And so Manasseh is chosen what? To be in the king line. Hezekiah. Want you, maybe when you go home, to take time to go back to chapter 32. Read the last picture of Hezekiah's life. The reason I think that Zephaniah goes back to him is he's the last God-loving, God-fearing king. He's living in the day when the Assyrian army is ready to march on Israel. And in Hezekiah's day, he has a great prophet. In his day, Isaiah's the prophet. So, let's see, can I find this real quick? It's probably worth in chapter 32, well, I won't go through all that. It's a long chapter. But if you go back to 32, it talks about Isaiah and Hezekiah standing arm in arm before the Lord as the Lord battles that Assyrian army, sends an angel. You see, the prophet and the king. Now remember this. It is Josiah, who is king now, and Zephaniah's great-great-grandpa, Hezekiah. Am I complicating that for you? Standing hand in hand, watching God work. Then Hezekiah dies, and Manasseh becomes king. That's when we start chapter 33. Great, wonderful. There aren't many of them in Israel, okay? Hezekiah is the top of the top. And Zephaniah wants you to know that. But he died, and then his son takes over, and who, by the way, is one of the most evil, terrible kings Israel ever knew. Let's see what it says about him. It says he reigned for 55 years. He started reigning when, he was 12, and he reigned for 55 years in Jerusalem, but did that which is evil. It's verse 2 in chapter 33. In the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again in the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. Host of heaven. Well, it's all the stars, astrology, Is he the angry oldest child? Is he, you made me go to church type boy? I don't know what is going on with him, but he's very upset at the way his father reigned, obviously. And so he goes just the opposite. He rebuilds the false gods' altars and groves, and he worships anything, I'm going to say, plus God. He doesn't totally, there's a time he'll repent. He doesn't forget God, but God isn't his God like he was his dad's God. Now, go all the way to verse 21, I believe it is. Manasseh died in chapter 33. And another name we read, okay, in the opening of Zephaniah, Ammon becomes king. Ammon is 22 years old when he becomes king. At least he's got a little age to him, right? And he reigns instead of Manasseh. And listen to this. And Ammon was, verse 21, and Ammon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. His reign only lasted 2 years. When you read that, the other guy you just read about reigned 55 years. You got to ask why, right? Well, it tells you. This is what happened. It says, but he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as did Manasseh his father, for Ammon sacrificed unto all the carved images, and which Manasseh his father had made, and served them, and humbled not himself before the Lord, as Manasseh his father had humbled himself. But Ammon trespassed more and more, and the servants conspired against him, and slew him in his own house. He's assassinated by those around him. He reigns only 2 years. Now, I'm trying to put this together, and it's a lot of names, but if you get the picture, it's unbelievable. He's 24 years old, right? And he dies. He's assassinated in his house. He's got a little son who he had obviously when he was about 16. It's 8 years old, living in that house. When his father is killed. Think that has an effect on you? Has the people around him, the people he trusted, worked with every day, plot in the background and kill his dad in his own house? What's that tell you? There's a good chance Josiah's home. And Josiah becomes king at 8 years old. You can go back and read all this, okay, but it'd take a long time. He has some kind of experience with God at 16. It tells you. 8 years in, he started trusting God. At age 16, he became Hezekiah remade, which would have been what? His great-grandpa. No, great-great-grandpa. Who else's grandpa is that? Zephaniah's grandpa. That's what he's telling you. He's laying this out to tell you that he reigned, Zephaniah, you can jump back there now, verse 1. At age 20, Josiah starts restoring everything that Manasseh and Ammon had tore apart from his great-great-grandpa Hezekiah, and becomes the next great king in Israel. Isaiah's not the prophet now. Zephaniah. They have the same great-great-grandpa. Now it isn't Isaiah and Hezekiah standing in the field for the Lord. It's two grandsons, Zephaniah and Josiah, standing together for God. Now, I say that to say this. If that was my history, that would be verse 1 in my book too. It's a return. It's a path that God designed. And I think it's amazing when I read it. And I can't tell you how many times I've read this verse and skipped over it and just go, oh, whatever. And then you track it back and you go, oh, my goodness. It's a repeat to the glory days. It's a prophet that really does love Jesus. And it's a king on a row for implementing things. Now, why the relationship is important? If your dad was killed when you was 8 years old by those that you trusted and he trusted, it really takes something to get in, to speak and be a part and a leader to you, wouldn't you think? Zephaniah reaches that level in Josiah's eyes. He's going to preach this message to the people, but he's got pathway into the king. I believe, and this is speculation on my part, but I look at the history, I read the story, I believe if he isn't the only trusted 100% servant in Josiah's kingdom, the only one that he does go to sleep and he can close both eyes with because of what happened to his dad. And knowing, hey, we got the same great-grandpa, and we got the same belief system. When they'd sit down and talk and what they were trying to accomplish, they had a model. It was Hezekiah's model. And they're trying to put it back together. And so I can see these two spending quite some time together. When you lose trust, have you ever lost trust? Have you ever been hurt, and I mean betrayed, by when someone you really trusted? It takes a lot to let someone in. And I think it's so amazing when you read the opening verse. In these days, it's not Assyria coming upon Israel. It's not Hezekiah and Isaiah standing hand to hand. Now it's Babylon coming, and it's them two great-grandsons. I want to tell you that is one proud great-great-grandpa. I think Hezekiah is saying, if he was alive, this is why I lived the way I lived. It went through 2 generations. Manasseh and Ammon never got it, but it comes back. And the message to the people is harsh. And it comes through 2 guys that have the right to preach that hard message. They have the history and the roots to know, Israel, God has been patient with you. They can look and say, hey, great-great-grandpa Hezekiah had things rowing. Things were right, and we served God. And God was blessing us. And then you walked off from God. And so, then when we read this, in verse 2, God has Zephaniah says, is going to consume all things from the land, said the Lord. I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of the heaven, fishes of the sea, and the stumbling blocks which with the wicked, and I will cut off men from the land, said the Lord. I will stretch out my hand upon Judea and upon all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. I will cut off the remnant of Baal from the palace, from the place, and the name of the Cherubimims with the priest, and then them that worship the host of heaven. Does that sound familiar? Remember Manasseh, the host of heaven? They're still worshiping. And they're going, Zephaniah said, no. God says it's over. We're going to have to return. And he's preaching this message. And he, in verse 6, and says, let me finish verse 5. And them that worship the host of heaven upon the housetops, and them that worship and that swear by the Lord and swear by Malcolm, and them that are turned back from the Lord, and those that have not sought the Lord nor inquired of him. He kind of breaks that down there in 3 different groups. There's those that serve the Lord, right? Now, aren't perfect, but in Israel, there was those still that served the Lord. Even in Jonah's day, when Jonah said, no, it was Elijah, said, there's no one but just me. And God said, oh, Elijah, give me a break. I got lots of other people. There's still people. So he says, listen, there are people that serve the Lord in Israel. But then he said, there are those that say they serve the Lord and aren't serving the Lord. That have served the Lord and have walked away from serving the Lord, he says in that verse. And then he says there's a third group, those that don't serve the Lord at all. They don't want anything to do with God. And he's saying God sees all this, and God is going to judge the land, Israel. And it's going to be a harsh judgment. And listen, when I'm reading them words, I'm going, God, you're going to destroy everybody and the fishes of the sea, and I listened to the message, and you got to remember that God has given this message through Zephaniah as a promised threat in hopes they will change. You read all these prophecies, this isn't what God desires to do. He isn't saying, listen, I'm going to get you guys. He's saying, listen, if I'm giving you warning, these are things that are going to come to pass if things don't change. I'm not going to allow this path any longer. They're sacrificing children on altars. This is a terrible, terrible time in Israel. Remember the Habakkuk's prayer? How long, God? How long? God's saying, not long in Zephaniah's day. And the fall's going to be harsh. And if you go on through and read all of Zephaniah, you come to some encouraging things along the lines there where in the end, Zephaniah begins talking, listen, God will never leave Israel and Judea. They are his chosen people. And at the end of every prophecy, there's always a reminder of that. Israel will always be Israel. The church is not a replacement for Israel, by the way. There's some that try to teach that. It is the church plus Israel. Israel right now is still don't believe in Jesus, the majority of them. But God hasn't given up on them. I think they need another Zephaniah and some of these guys and Nahum and Jeremiah, and maybe they do hear those voices. To come to the Lord. But you come and we study in Revelations, and Israel still owes God 7 years of time. And there's a 7-year period in Revelations called the tribulation period. And if you look, it goes back to Israel. The church, that's why the rapture makes sense. The church that is working and God's working through today is raptured. There's a 7-year tribulation period. Where's the focus go? Back to Israel. What's God's goal? It could be this prophet prophesying to them during that 7 years, come. And you know, it's neat because when we read Revelations, what's it say? 144,000 Jews, 12,000 of each tribe during that time come to know Jesus, right? Come to the Lord. Same message. Israel is still as contrary as it ever was. But so's the church, isn't it? So's the church. It's unique to look at God's path and how he works. You know, the Old Testament, some say, well, you don't even need to study or look at it today. But Paul says in the New Testament that it's the example. It's an example for us to look at and to follow and to learn by. When you study these prophets, you say, listen, nations, no matter how powerful, how wonderful, how strong, how established, can fall. They can fall. And then you look at our day and time, don't you? You look around and you think, has there ever been anything blessed more than America? And I say that with this thought. I want to tell you, I believe with all of my heart, the reason America is so blessed is because of its heart and its willingness to share the blessing that it has received. You hear all the negative and on the news and the things going on around inside our country. But you go to Haiti and you go to places, you know, I'll never forget talking to Willem Charles, who's the missionary that we work with through Haiti, the poorest nation in the world. Remember back when they had the earthquake? You know what he said his first thought was? That this hit America. You know why, he said? Because he said, if I knew it didn't hit America too, I knew help was on the way. When you're hearing all them bad messages about how bad everything is and how bad everybody in this country is and how bad the church is, hey, sit back and think, this is the most giving, wonderful country I think that ever existed. Not only within its walls, within the church itself. Our churches have always been missionary minded. What has always been our goal? What is our call? What is our mission? Go into all the world telling them about Jesus Christ and baptizing them in the name of Jesus, right? Did that mission ever change? It never changed. Think about the mission for the church. It's never been about what goes on just inside its walls. It's never only been about itself. It's never been about, hey, this is a wonderful building, but this isn't what we're about, right? It's never been about that. It's about that next soul out there that doesn't know Jesus. Now, here's the neat thing. We're not Israel. We're not so concerned that soul that we're concerned about has to be within our borders. That's Old Testament, right? God stuck it. They were always concerned within the borders. We're concerned. You find it unique that we're concerned about some soul over in Haiti so much that we reach in our back pockets and put it in an offering plate to send that money off to a denomination that we don't even know who's at the top of, who will take that money, run it through the process, then figure it out, send it through some missionary, which we don't even know their name, who will go to that country, who will share Jesus, that soul will come to know the Lord. We do that every day. That's still our mission. You know, I don't talk as much as I should sometimes about, as a church, that we give and we invest. We've had the blessed opportunity to go and do some mission work as individuals and people in our church, but we give faithfully as a church and as individuals to our American Baptist denomination who take that money and send missionaries everywhere in the world. Worried about some soul in Nicaragua? Want to tell you something. Can't go there, don't have a ticket, we got a missionary there. Worried about someone in Russia, we got a missionary there. Worried about someone in China or Kenya or somewhere, we got missionaries there. How do they go? Dollars that were collected here with dollars that were collected somewhere else and combined together, and people that had a calling on their life went. You find that amazing? I look at our country, and I want you to know, I think there is both judgment and mercy coming to this country. When I read these stories, I think there is judgment. I don't think God continues to tolerate the attitude that we see sometimes. But I believe with that comes a mercy, because I believe I see so many good and wonderful hearts, and I don't think the gates of hell will ever prevail against this church. You believe that? That gives us encouragement. Even when we're reading Zephaniah, and you go home and read it, and it's a real harsh book. I mean, but he tells them all of that with God's, kind of like, and I'll close with this. And I hope your parents never said this to you or your dad, but my dad's told me before he was going to kill me. Okay? Now, he really wasn't intending in the next few minutes to kill me. It was a threat to kind of get my attention. Would he have followed through? Possibly. No. Hey, here's the thought. He was convincing me he would. Standing there in the minute, I'm going, yeah, he's going to kill me. And what happened? Then I had a choice. And because I believed his threat to be true, what did I do? I responded to the threat. I didn't look up and say, hey, old man, you said that last week. There ain't no way you're going to kill me, because he would have then killed me. Right? So, but the initial thought was not becoming a murderer. He's just that's God speaking to the nation Israel. He's saying through Zephaniah, I'm going to kill you people if you don't get it together. Is that his goal? Is that what he wants to do? No, he wants a response. He wants them to listen, to wake up. By the way, we got 3 more prophets to go. They didn't. They didn't wake up. And God wasn't kidding about Babylon at all. He knew them well. He wasn't kidding about Assyria when he was prophesying back then through them. And I think if we heard his message today, I think the thing that we would probably hear is, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Anyway, is that depressing? I hope not. Okay. Sometimes the truth is heavy on your heart, but it's also, hey, I think God's going to use the church, and it is my thought that through all of this time and through everything I say, or I hear and I see, that the church rises up. I can't change the government, and I know that, and I don't think any of us here really think we're going to be able to change the government. But I do believe that we can change the church, and the answer in anything and at all times is to become a more faithful, more loving, more encouraging, more dedicated, more honest church than we've ever been before. And we got that opportunity. And that's the good news. When we go home, we got that opportunity. Okay. Gary ain't here to say, hey, Fred, you're done. You want to say it, Jimmy? Fred? Yeah. I think we're about done. Gary's getting on the plane, Fred. You better stop. Okay.
All right, real quick, this is off the subject, if that's all right.